We'll go through the consent agenda now. We have the approval of the strategic plan retreat minutes as well as the city commission from February 17th to the 20th. And then we have a couple items. C1 under miscellaneous reports, city attorney.
Yeah, we have a couple of amendments to the land development code that require one of the hearings to be after 5 p.m. And we're just asking that you waive that requirement.
Everybody good keeping that on consent? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. There, Florida statutes say that when you make certain kinds of amendments to the land development code, in this case, if you change the list of uses that are allowed or not allowed in the zoning district, you always have to hold two readings at least. But in that case, you would have to hold one of those after 5 p.m. unless the city commission actually it's a supermajority votes to hold it before 5 p.m. So we're just asking you to waive that requirement for a post 5 p.m. hearing.
We could, if an issue came up, we could ask for a public meeting in the evening too.
Sure.
Right.
Anytime.
All right. If there are no other questions, we'll move on to item number 7, Finance Director, item A.
Yes, good morning. Similar to what Mr. McLean brought to us a month or so ago with the police vehicles, where he was able to come across an opportunity to purchase vehicles ahead of schedule that would save us a great deal of money. That same opportunities come to us in the way of 2 front-end loaders for solid waste. We have most of those monies accrued for those vehicles, $611,352. We are short funding of $77,550, which is available in the solid waste unappropriated surplus. So we're requesting approval to do an appropriation to take that money out of unappropriated surplus to then order these 2 vehicles. The estimated savings is $25,000 to $30,000 per vehicle for these 2 vehicles by ordering them now rather than waiting until the normal scheduled time.
Do we have questions for Mr. Brossart? Yes, Commissioner Music, then Commissioner McLeod.
What do we have in the total of the unappropriated surplus?
For solid waste?
Yes. How much of a chunk is this taking up?
Oh, it's not making a dent, but I'll tell you in just a moment. Do you remember off the top of your head?
Yeah, last check with Deidre was $6.6 million.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got ample
1% of that, yeah.
for that. Yeah.
Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you. What's the lifespan of a front-end loader?
Approximately 5 to 7
Barely
years.
5 right now. We're having a lot of maintenance issues. This is a new body that we're going to try out, and we believe this is going to actually be a better solution. We're saving $20,000 just this year by buying these because they were actually purchased or originally ordered by the city of Dunedin, and they defaulted on the PO, so we have an opportunity to slide in there and steal these. It's a very good opportunity.
Thank you.
With regard to maintenance on those, you know how John Deere, and I think there's a federal legislation right now for people to be able to work on their heavy equipment like that. Are we able to work on it and maintain it ourselves?
Yes.
And so when you say, though, that they're hard in their lifespan, it's hard. Is it hard to get parts, or why is that lifespan shorter of 5 years?
It's a very abusive environment. The front loaders. It's a lot of the trucks take a real beating. We're actually a warranty center for the chassis, so we're more than authorized to work on them.
Oh, good. Cool. All right. Thank you, Mr. Brossart. So we'll go back to the top of the agenda. I don't see any other asterisk items. We have no requests to appear from the general public. There are equalization hearings, so sorry.
Loss cleaning, clearing, usual cases, properties, nothing unusual there.
Okay. Public hearings, there are no second readings. There are 4 first readings.
So these first 2 ordinances are why we're having to waive the 501 hearing requirement. And Chuck's going to walk you through some amendments to the land development code.
Sure. In fact, I'll turn over to Matthew Lyons. We've got 2 land development code amendments that are proposed at this point. One's related to affordable housing. The other is related to kind of addressing an omission in the code regarding emergency facilities. And so I'll turn over to Matt, and will be his slide advancer as we go through these 2 items.
Thank you.
Okay, this first item here is in response to a change that the legislature made in the last session. pertains to allowing affordable multifamily residential uses in non-residential districts. Typically, these would be like either commercial or industrial properties. Generally, I think the 10 was probably said were underutilized to be redeveloped for affordable multifamily. So there would be a requirement that they actually meet that definition for affordable housing in the state statutes, which we'll go through here. So the changes pursuant to Chapter 166, we're proposing to allow in certain residential districts, along with location criteria, development standards, and an approval process. The way the legislature wrote the statute, it gives the authority to the local governing body, which would be you guys. But beyond that, it really didn't set any criteria for approval. So we kind of went through this, and we looked at the only other city that's actually implemented this, which was St. Petersburg. And so we came up with a process we think will allow for this. Just going through the planning and zoning board, it would not be a full like a zoning approval, 3 to 4 month process where it goes to you guys, but it would require that type of detailed review where they have to come forward with an actual comprehensive development plan, site plan, elevations overall before they can go to permitting. So, and we would also notify property owners nearby to give them an opportunity to comment. So the first part is just amending Table 2.3-1 just to allow the use here, and we define it as multifamily affordable housing and non-residential zoning districts. And go back to Chuck. And we have listed C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, and I1. So we did not allow it in I2 or I3, which are the more intense industrial districts. That would be like Drainfield Road, New Tampa Highway, stuff like that. But it would allow for areas like Rose Street, East Main Street, areas east of downtown, which have struggled for a long time, to be redeveloped for this. So we think that would probably be the ideal location for what we're proposing. And the second part, we amend Article 5 to define the specific use here. We have the definitions, location criteria, standards for approval, and other requirements. And so this is pretty standard here, just what our intent is. We define affordable housing. Go back, Chuck. And this would be based on the state definition here. Once your monthly rents, mortgage payments do not exceed 30% of the median adjusted income. For households whose total income does not exceed 120% of the median adjusted income in the Lakeland Winter MSA. Go down. And the way we wrote this, we would require that they be within 1 1/4 mile of a transit-oriented corridor. Those are defined in the Land Development Code. Those would be your major sort of busways there. Or along a fixed transit route was how we set it up. And so the route must provide headways of at least 60 minutes or less. And Chuck can explain which lines those would qualify for that.
And most of those are like the Gold Line, the Blue Line, just the main core routes operated by the Citrus Connection.
Okay. And so the way we set this up, we want to make sure that these are substantial projects. We don't want just some small investor coming in trying to buy like a single-family lot and do something which is really going to be inconsequential. So we did set a minimum development size of 1 acre and a minimum density of 12 per acre. And we wrote it up to 75 per acre. Though realistically, with parking and other requirements, you're probably looking at 30s being the maximum in most cases. And we do want like a minimum number of units per building and a minimum height of 2 stories. So we do want to get that density. If we're going to go forward with this, we want to get some substantial investment. And we are requiring that the minimum of 25% of the units be made affordable to qualified buyers or renters for a minimum time period of 30 years. So that would be something they would have to do their deed restrictions incorporate in order to qualify for the use under our code here. And we also added a requirement that the affordable units at market rate, they be comparable in terms of quality and design, so they're not kind of just sticking them in the back and doing some really small substandard units. We want them to be equivalent in terms of the type of, the amenities and other things that they offer. And we did add a option, they want to do mixed use where you have some type of ground floor commercial, it could be office, retail, restaurants. That would be an option, but we did not want to allow motor vehicle oriented uses, obviously, so things like oil change facilities, auto repair, gas stations. I mean, that would not be appropriate. And we are asking that they employ certain urban design elements to maximize walkability. This would be stuff like decorative lighting, street furniture, outdoor seating, expanded sidewalks, landscaping, underground utilities, other things here that, again, this will be through the actual review process. We would actually see what they're proposing to meet that there. And so the way we set this up is it would be done through a compatibility review before the Planning and Zoning Board. That would be just sort of one meeting and you're done. We would notify any properties within 250 feet of the project site. And we do have some criteria. We want to make sure that they're going to be compatible, so that they're not next to any sort of intense industrial uses that would maybe be inappropriate. So we do want to look at that context, but also that we don't want to create a situation where if you have an existing business that say is open late at night, where they have a lot of late night truck traffic. We don't want to create a situation where you have that sort of conflict where you have new residents complaining about the truck traffic or the other noise there. So we want to think about it as well. So if the business that's established there, if they have that concern, we want to be able to at least listen to that and take that into consideration. So the other part is just general comments about open space in the code here, but also design the building compatibility, setbacks, building mass, orientation, height, that type of thing, materials. So we will require detailed architectural elevations. And also of course, the Planning and Zoning Board, they had the option of imposing any conditions or limitations there based on that to protect the health and safety and welfare of residents and adjacent property owners. And so they go through this process, they'll then be able to go the site plan building permit approval. They would not be required to go to the City Commission. And we did add a requirement for sort of a pre-application meeting before they start the process, just so they can sit down with staff and get a sense of what it is they want to do and make sure they understand. We want these to be quality projects, not just some standard off-the-shelf suburban multifamily type housing. So we want to have that conversation before we get them going through the process.
All right, do we have questions for Mr. Lyons? Yes, Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So Matt, this basically just eliminates the step of having to rezone property. If someone could do this today, they just have to go through a rezoning process, correct?
Well, the way it's written now, it says it would be up to you guys. So if someone wanted to request that, I mean, theoretically, they could, I guess, start an application and go through Planning and Zoning Board to the Commission, but there's no real criteria other than that you guys had the final say in approving it or not. So We looked at St. Petersburg, their requirements. They're a little bit different, but they have a similar process for how they approve it there. So again, there wasn't a lot of guidance in the statute as to how to set it up here. So we wanted to be maybe a little more light-handed than have to come to you guys. But certainly, if you want to add that requirement, you could set it up that way. But that's kind of the way it is right now.
So the statute would have allowed you to simply make those a permitted use in any of those commercial or industrial districts, and this is provide some safeguards in addition to what the statute would allow. I think the typical process for someone that wanted to do something like this would be to apply for a PUD if they wanted to go into a commercial or industrial district.
Yeah, otherwise that would be the typical process. But I think the way, the legislature, there are a multitude of ways you could do it. Like Palmer said, you could make it as simple as just saying, hey, if you made the definition of affordable, you could do it by right period with no other reviews or anything else. But we thought because of the where these projects are going, we thought it would be more appropriate to have an actual set of rules and kind of guidelines for how they get approved.
Commissioner Music.
Do we think, and I think we would all agree that, we need more housing, we need this more type of stuff, but one of the biggest things that come in front of us are these developments. And one of the big things that we have are, we can always go back to, we don't think that it's compatible, right? Is this going to blur that line and make it more difficult for us as a commission to look at something and say, it's not, if somebody comes with something else and they say, but you let something go here and that used to be industrial, that won't cause us a headache farther down the line with.
It could.
The more things we let.
That was raised in the Lake Miriam apartment case, if you recall. They were trying to make that argument.
Well, and that's where with kind of limiting on the industrial side to I-1, that's something where the types of uses that are typically in there don't have the odors or the noise or the the other things that you typically think of in a it's more of a business park type of environment. So that's where, from a compatibility standpoint, we try to keep it as kind of basic as possible.
Gotcha.
And that compatibility review occurs at Planning and Zoning Board, not the City Commission.
Right.
So that does help a little bit with what your concern is.
Okay, perfect.
Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So, Chuck, could you help me with 5.26.1 when it talks about intent and applicability? It says the intent of the section to establish procedures and standards which will incentivize and allow for the development of affordable housing. So I know that we're kind of putting parameters there on, kind of restricting it to a 25% affordable mix. Does that mean, A, that no one who wanted to go into Rose Street and do a full-on market rate multifamily would be prohibited? And then B, what type of incentives are offered for adding this, 25% affordable, other than they can just now build there and they couldn't before?
They can really that 25% is the floor, and so if they wanted to come in and it would just be market rate, say in the Rose Street district, then they would have to go through a rezoning or go through get a PUD or go through the normal process as it exists today. And so that's we're not saying they can't do that. It's just they wouldn't be able to take advantage of the procedures, kind of more or less the compatibility focused procedures that are allowed through these changes here. In terms of other incentives, if it's a bona fide affordable housing project, a developer can apply through the housing division for impact fee waivers or reductions to be able to, lower their upfront cost on that front. So there's some things in there that are already in place that if you're truly an affordable housing development, you can still take advantage of those options. The other thing too is that a lot of the Rose Street areas and within our core improvement areas, so developers are not paying non-utility impact fees anyway. So there's another incentive that hopefully we can start over time to continue to guide more of that type of development into the central city area where the infrastructure is available. It's just that they're really underutilized today because of changes over time that have occurred to the road system and everything else.
Okay, and then where are we on opportunity zones? Are we already past the benefit of those? I know under Trump era, if you got in, you could kind of, rest your cash there without paying your capital gains.
The balance of the 10 years, I think, is probably 6 or 7 years out now, but at yesterday's CRA Advisory Board meeting, the developer for Peachtree Flats mentioned that their project is in an opportunity zone. They have availed themselves of that benefit. So I think that was comfort for the advisory board to say, we're going to be the owners and operators of this project for at least the balance of that 10-year period. We haven't really had a whole lot of other direct inquiries relative to opportunity zones. But that is another incentive, of course, for those who could realize the tax benefit on the capital gains through an opportunity zone.
Absolutely. Okay.
And Commissioner Band, I'll add that percentage, the statute just requires a minimum of 10%, but it's up to the local government to set the threshold. I believe St. Petersburg, they have 100% is their actual affordability requirement. So we went with 25, kind of more towards the lower end there, but you could go as low as 10% if you want to, but we thought 25%, we do want to see more affordable units. So we do want to have some type of, carrot approach there to we get something in return, I guess is what I'm saying, that we're not just giving away the farm just to get density for density's sake. So.
Commissioner Reed?
Thank you. This is for non-residential zone property, basically, right?
Yes.
And because I was just watching highlights, how are we going to get 75 units per acre on a two-story building?
Well, that's the minimum. Minimum is 2-story. So
Minimum of a two-story, so we can go up to 120
I believe it's like, it's 70 feet now, I believe, on the corridor. So they could do like a 5-story would be, 5 to 6-story would be what they would be, probably be the maximum.
What is our present rate when you get a permit to get to start building? This is 365 days. What's current? Is it 2 years? If you get a building permit and don't start, how long do you have?
Typically 18 months when you have an approved site plan. I believe it's the.
Is the date before the site plan expires?
This is 365 days on particular issue, right? Okay.
And normally the building permit process, I mean, it's really applicant driven. The site plans typically take a lot longer than the building permits. And site plans, for affordable housing projects now, we're truncating the review process. It was 10 days, even on the initial round, where today it's 20 working days, and then 10 working days for subsequent reviews. For affordable housing, we've cut that first submittal time in half, but it still depends on the quality of the plans and how many review cycles they actually end up needing.
What did we do about signage? I know if you get in the commercial area, you can have bigger signs, and we don't want to have a big apartment complex with a great big sign sticking up in the air. How is that addressed anywhere?
Sticking up in the air 15 feet outside of the interchange activity centers at the interstate. 15 feet is the highest ground sign that is allowed anywhere in the city.
Okay. And then another thing, you were talking about limiting things to like automotive sales and repairs of oil changes. That's already allowed in some of those areas, so isn't it?
For by right commercial, but for the mixed use component, we wanted to ensure that they were uses they would be compatible with residential. So we didn't think it would be appropriate to have automobile repair service fuel stations as part of a mixed use development. So that's why we excluded those uses from the residential if they want to do mixed use.
I know it's a minimum of an acre. Is there a maximum that they could do that in? Is there 25, 50, 100 acres you can do that?
We didn't dictate a maximum.
No, we did not dictate a maximum for as far as the development site area.
Okay.
And again, the areas that we're thinking where this would be most ideal would be like East Main Street, East Rose, these kind of areas that have all the infrastructure in place, but they've seen a lot of disinvestment for a long period of time, but they're close to downtown, so there are areas that they would probably be attractive for that type of redevelopment. We're not thinking Drainfield Road, New Tampa Highway,
Well, this could probably too help around Lakeland Square Mall, because that's C5. So that may be another way too to jumpstart some residential up there.
Yeah, but you do have some older strip centers that are kind of struggling, and I believe the legislature in this current session, they're looking at adding actual economic incentives to encourage it further. So I have not seen the latest proposal, but I recall before the session started that they were talking about that. So,
Pass the demo as we go. Any other questions on this item? Okay, we'll move to the next item, number 2.
All right, number 2 is somewhat of a housekeeping matter. Chuck report, Matt.
Yeah, this one's a housekeeping matter. Basically what happened, the current land development code, we adopted at the end of 2013. And when we drafted it, the author, they had added utility services facilities uses like public safety, security. This would be your police, fire, ambulance facilities. Originally, they were under this category here, but somehow they ended up in public non-commercial principal uses. And then I guess in 2015, we redefined that category to add quasi non-public and created 2 levels, but somehow this use got deleted. So for the last 8 years, we have not allowed this use, but we also, I guess we have not seen any proposals for new.
Yeah, it hasn't been an issue.
It came up recently, I guess the county, or they're looking for a property up there, is it Lake Crego?
On Robson Street, the EMS station.
EMS station there, and they were asking about the zoning, what was required, and it was not clear, so we looked at it further. This is when we found out what happened. So basically what we're proposing is to restore the use back to utility and essential service facilities. This include basic infrastructure like your substations, your lift stations, things like that. So it's a core function, obviously, of local government and critical. So we thought it would be appropriate to put it back there than keep it in the public quasi non-commercial, which would require conditional use. So we want to allow by right. It would only be for public facilities. It would not be for any type of private, like a private ambulance company, for example. So would be for city or county only.
Questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Sure.
All right, C1 miscellaneous.
All right, C1, we, as you know, have a certification agreement with the state of Florida that exempts us from having to forward almost all of our comp plan amendments for state review, which expedites that process quite a bit. One of the conditions of our agreement with the state is that we do an annual report. So Chuck, are you going to walk them through that?
Yeah, we'll do that very, very briefly. And first, I want to give kudos to Brandy Gillenwater in our office. She's the one that solicited and got all of the information from multiple departments and agencies to be able to put the report together. And so it was definitely a Herculean task, and we appreciate all of her work she did on that.
Good job.
But as Palmer said, this is something that's required as part of our certification agreement. We're one of about 4 or 5 certified planning communities in the state of Florida. And so every year, the report is developed to show how we're meeting our targets, basically what is the local planning agency, City Commission, and the Planning and Zoning Board doing to further the objectives and the goals as outlined in the certification agreement in our comprehensive plan. And so this is just a couple of examples of what was done on the left. The exhibit there shows the large-scale and small-scale land use amendments that were approved by the Commission over the past year. And the right is the first page of the actual report to show how we're meeting our compactness goals, our interconnectivity goals, how many site plans we have that have multimodal requirements for transportation conditions. We've got housing conditions. It's really interesting to see that, particularly when you start looking back at 2004, which was our base year for the agreement. Our population back then was just under 89,000. Today it's 120,000. So our density has gone up, from just over 2 to about 2.5. You start looking at the non-residential intensities. We're starting to see a lot more jobs per acres of land within the city. We have items in here related to employment per square mile, housing ownership, per capita water consumption, which is definitely much lower. It dropped from just under 9 to 5.9 per capita. So it really shows how over time the policies, or we believe that the policies as outlined in the comprehensive plan that's adopted by the Commission, really are starting to help us make movement towards having a more efficient, livable community. So the certification report really pulls it all together and provides that to the State Department of Economic Opportunity.
Questions? Yes, sir, Commissioner Reed.
I know in the past meetings, we've talked about our our traffic element, and maybe making, how do we intensify this or lower, what do you want to call it, make it more easy to get to level F, per se? Is that within here? Are we doing anything with that? And we need to do it somewhere, and I think this is maybe the spot to do it.
That's almost a separate issue, and in fact, our comprehensive plan right now has level of service standards that place less of an emphasis on highway travel, depending on which part of the city that you're in. So where we're trying to increase densities and intensities within the central city, and that's really between Wabash and the city limits on the east and the Parkway and I-4, that's where we look at bike ped connectivity, transit service, and use those as really our primary basis for making development determinations. If we, through a separate policy discussion related to the comp plan on that front, one of the things that we would say is that I think that ends up almost working against us in some of what's included in the certification report, because in that places less of an emphasis on enhancing transit service or getting the sidewalk connections that we need to serve those developments. But it's really kind of separate from the certification, but it's something that's more part of the overall comprehensive planning process. That was just updated in 2021. So we're in the middle of a 10-year plan, but definitely have opportunities for periodic updates to the plan to talk about issues, and level of services being one of them.
Invariably, I hear more about traffic than anything else going on, and we've discussed this in manner, but I didn't know how we could, what it takes to make the level of F less, how to get to level of service F quicker.
I think that's something, and I'll look across the table here, that maybe a workshop or something. It's really the commission's pleasure to have those conversations, and certainly we can be prepared to be able to have that conversations. I think part of the discussion would be is what does that mean too in terms of funding? Because anytime we change the level of service standard and say place more of a highway emphasis, we've got to be able to show that there's a funding change to help pay for that change. And that's been another big issue is that we've been able to, traffic, say the road system, as much as people complain about traffic here, it's actually performing within our level of service standards with the exception of one or two corridors. And even if you compare to the rest of the county, our system is doing much, much, much better. So that would be part of the conversation is that we can look at changing the level of service, but we've got to have a funding stream to improve intersections, to improve roadways, and that's going to be something the state looks at as well. Even though the state's not in the level of service business anymore, we start playing with our standards. They're going to then step in and say, okay, now what's that funding? What do those funding sources look like?
It has to be a level playing field across the state when you look at FDOT and the federal government. So they're going to be very hesitant if we change our level of standards. It's not comparative to the rest of the county, and it's not comparative to the other counties around us. So we can probably do it, but it doesn't mean we'll get any funding for it. Commissioner Music, that's right. They'll preempt us, so they're going to.
Yeah, and I think that not being a traffic engineer or a city planner, I would like at some point to have a workshop, just if nothing more than to explain some of the things in a little more detail than you did, because at the end of the day, when we're running through Publix and people are complaining to us, if they come to a meeting, they're going to look and say, well, this meets a certain level of standard. And they're like, my level of standard is different than. So being able to have that education to be able to say, well, let me give you a little bit of information about what that means. So I would love that education if there was a time we could get some stuff together and do it more as a group than maybe a one-on-one.
Absolutely. At the pleasure of, we can certainly work on that and have those conversations, because I think it's important too to be able to highlight that, and that's always been a huge issue when it comes to kind of the publicly published level of service standards we have, the typical A through F categories that people are used to. Very subjective.
Sure.
Ultimately,
Absolutely.
It gets down to, what is the travel speed on a corridor, or what is the delay at an intersection? And so I think that's, everybody's perceptions are different, but we can have those conversations certainly.
So let's do this. Thumbs up if we would all be willing to come in for a workshop on this. All right. We got 6 thumbs up. Good? Okay. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, Matt. All right, city manager.
Yes, I just have one item this morning. It's a recommendation to purchase media material for the chlorine scrubber at the Williams Water Treatment Plant from F.J. Nugent and Associates. The chlorine dry scrubber at the plant is utilized to neutralize gaseous chlorine in the event of a leak, and to function, the dry scrubber uses this media material, which is a consumable product and does break down over time and is currently in need of replacement. The city does have experience with the two companies that provided quotes for this material, and we're recommending that we go with the one that came in with the highest total quote. However, based on our experience with the two different companies, one of the products has a longer lifespan than the other, and so when you divide the life expectancy into the total cost, the one with the higher total quote ends up having a lower cost per year because of the lifespan being longer. So the recommendation is to go with the higher total cost, but again, the lower annual cost based on the life expectancy. So the recommendation would be to purchase the material from F.J. Nugent and Associates, and the quoted price would be not to exceed $65,640, and there is something available in the water utilities budget.
Questions? Yes, Commissioner Music.
I have a question that has to do with this, but not. It's more of a procedure question. When I look at our agenda, why does that item fall under city manager?
Good question.
Typically, what we try to do is if there's a lot of legal terms and conditions that have to be reviewed, it goes into our portion of the agenda. If it's more of a straightforward business decision, it goes under city manager.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And if you watch, other county commission meetings or other city,
Which we all do.
and there's various different ways of doing that. I mean, there are some cities in the county that do it differently, but here in Lakeland, historically, when there's a lot of legality involved or contracts involved, typically it falls under the attorney's office.
Thank you.
Which is a perfect segue into item 6 under city attorney, first
All right,
readings.
so items 6A1 and 2, those are both related to the same development, an 88-unit multifamily project on Neville Avenue. Chuck?
All right. Thanks, Palmer. And the subject property is 3.53 acres. It's actually located north of Memorial Boulevard, east of Brunel Parkway. And the land use component of this would change the land use from residential medium to residential high. It's kind of a uniquely situated piece of property because it's at the end of two streets, Neville and Crestview Avenue. It's the end of 7th Street there at the CSX rail line, and it's also right next to 7th Street Park. So there's some different aspects here with this development. But essentially, the proposal is to build 88 apartment units. The actual parking count on that is 113 spaces would be part of the development proposal. 124 are allowed, minus 12 spaces for the bike parking. So they're right at their minimum requirement there for 88 units. But what you see here is, the 3 of the 4 buildings would be oriented more north-south. The east-west building, we'll talk about that in a minute in terms of condition here to improve the compatibility with the single-family residential to the south. Be 3-story on the north side of the building, 2-story on the south side of the building. The project would also, because it abuts the CSX rail line, would also include a substantial wall and buffer to address trespassing and noise and those types of impacts. And then the other thing would be a requirement that they work with the city's parks and recreation department to look at connectivity to 7th Street Park, given that that's a public facility right next door. This is the elevation that was presented to the modified elevation that was presented to the Planning and Zoning Board, and you see here, this is the southern building that 3 stories on the north side, 2 stories to the south to try to handle that transition with the single-family neighborhood to the south. So the project again is 88 dwelling units. It's 1, 2, 3 bedrooms, so it kind of covers the waterfront in terms of unit mix. The development standards would be in compliance with the MF22 urban neighborhood context. We would have a binding site plan associated with the development. quite a bit of language in here related to the buffers because of where the property is located. Type A buffers around pretty much, I think, all of the fringes of the development site. We would also make sure that Parks and Recreation, that they're able to review the type of vegetation that's proposed as part of the site plan review process. We're also requiring that the applicant extend kind of the barrier from the wall against the rail line to the adjacent property at the north end of Crestview Avenue, just again to seal up that corridor and not have an attractive point for folks to try to get onto the CSX right-of-way to cross over towards downtown. Outdoor lighting and compliance with Land Development Code. Utility capacity is a big issue with this project because this is in the west side area of concern. This is the area where the trunk line is being designed right now by water utilities. I don't believe that that's expected to be operational until 2027. And so as part of this whole program is that there needs to be an intrusion and inundation mitigation project on the wastewater side to be able to offset the impacts of this development on the wastewater system. If they're not able to reach an agreement, then it's likely that this project will get slowed down in terms of being able to move forward. The reality is that by the time we would get a site plan submittal, if the zoning's approved, we're probably a year to 18 months from getting site plan approval. Construction would be another 18 months, and so we're not far off from that 2027 date, but we've made it clear to the applicant. The applicant's had conversations with water utilities that this is an issue that has to be addressed.
But Chuck, if I may, just on that point, there's also no guarantee at this point that option's going to be available.
Right.
That there are some other pending developments similarly that have also been given that potential option, and should one of those other developments that are already, it's been offered to them, should they utilize it, it may not be available for this one. Though that's not looking likely, so it may very well be available, but I just want to point out that this is not a guarantee that option is going to be available.
So, utilities, that's probably the biggest issue with this proposal. And then, of course, there has to be a property management agency that's responsible for the on-site maintenance of the amenities. Transportation, this is a little of a unique area in that there isn't any transit service nearby on Memorial Boulevard, but there is the yellow line available on Brunel Parkway. It's about 1,000 feet west of the site. So from a distance standpoint, folks can get to the transit line, just is at a sidewalk on 7th Street. So we're looking at different options to try to fund a sidewalk on 7th Street. And so that would be part of a separate conversation we would have parallel to this project. And really they go through the standard concurrency review process. They have to get school concurrency determination from the school district, and then just making sure that all of the internal drive aisles, that basically the interconnectivity with this development blends in well with the surrounding neighborhood, because this is in the middle of an established neighborhood.
Chuck, would they be zoned for Jesse Keene and Kathleen, and then what would the middle school be, do you think?
Oh, I just blanked on it. I think right now they're probably, it's Jesse Keene, Kathleen High, and the middle school, maybe Sleepy Hill Middle.
Okay. Oh, man.
But we'll confirm. But they've gotten
That's not walkable. Sorry.
Right.
Okay, questions? Yes, Commissioner Reed.
How many trains go up down that track a day? Do you have any idea?
Right now, I want to say they're right around 20 a day. I mean, it varies, but that is the S line that runs to Jacksonville from the Winter Haven ILC. So that is the major freight line through Central Florida.
So they can't complain about noise. Obviously, like airports, stuff like that, they can't, there's nothing we can do about that.
They can complain, yes.
Well,
Yes,
the
they
rail
can.
line is there, the rail's there first, so they need to see it when they were signing the lease. Other questions? Thanks, Chuck.
All right, so the next item is a scaled-back version of a project that you saw about a year ago and actually declined to approve. on Hardin Boulevard, a self-storage facility. Chuck?
All right, so this is in north of Grasslands Boulevard, west of Hardin. This was the previous site of, I think it was 102,000 square foot self-storage facility with outdoor RV and boat storage. As Mr. Davis said, this is a scaled-back version of that request. The subject property seen here just north of Azalea Park and south of Beacon Terrace. Subject property there adjacent to Hardin Boulevard. And so we'll just reorient again everybody with the site in question. Undeveloped, surrounded by, you've got Beacon Terrace across, or Moss Verde on the east side of Hardin Boulevard, Beacon Terrace to the north, Azalea Park to the south, and then Muirfield Woods within Grasslands to the west. And we really want to highlight, too, that on this property, because of various challenges with the site, over the past almost 30 years, there have been a number of changes to not only the PUD, but also the Oak Ridge Development Regional Impact Development Order that have applied to this property. Most recently, back in 2018, the PUD was changed to allow a 100-unit assisted living facility. So that is what the self-storage facility, if it was approved, would replace that zoning. This was the original plan that was reviewed and denied by the City Commission last year. And this is the elevation that was reviewed at that time. So just taking a look towards the site from Hardin Boulevard. So in terms of the 2023 proposal, the outdoor storage of RVs and boats has been removed. The rear setback has been increased from 130 feet to 200 feet. The building height has been reduced from 3 stories to 2 stories, or a 28-foot building height. Square footage was reduced from 102,675 down to 94,000 square feet. And then there have been some additional changes to the facade to make the building look more like an office. So the current plan is shown here. You've got a right-in, right-out driveway on Hardin Boulevard. The condition still stands that would require the median opening that exists today to be directionalized to allow only southbound lefts into Moss Verde. And I know that we have, even up through the Planning and Zoning Board hearing, continued to hear concerns from Moss Verde about that condition, but that is just something that's been in place for 20 years at this point because of the speed of Hardin Boulevard, and having full movement there is really a big concern of staff and DOT. There's a emergency-only cross access that would still be in place going behind Azalea Park down to Grasslands Boulevard. That would be gated, only used in emergencies, and so that condition is a carryover from last year's discussion. And of course, you see the retention pond in the buffer to the west. We did receive a petition from Beacon Terrace concerned about the impacts of the building and the overall development on their nature trail within their community. And so we do have some conditions proposed that would address that. But you can see that there is a sizable buffer between the building and the Beacon Terrace property boundary. So we're trying to address those concerns. This is the current proposal. Again, the building itself in form looks like an office building. We also have a requirement that would restrict the use of an electronic message sign for their signage, again, to try to make this look more like an office as possible. So jumping into the conditions of approval, again, 94,000 square foot mini warehouse self-storage facility. We have C2 uses that apply only to the former Grasslands sales office, and I know that was a point of confusion last time. That does not apply to this site. That applies further down towards Grasslands Boulevard. But we do have clarification about, the conditions related to Azalea Park. Again, the mini warehouse would be becoming an allowable use. The mini warehouse would be restricted to 2 stories, 28 feet. The access, as I stated, the conditions would still remain related to Hardin Boulevard, the emergency-only connection down to Grasslands Boulevard. The project would have to be permitted also through the Department of Transportation, since Hardin Boulevard does control, or DOT does control Hardin. So the elevations and the design would be binding, so the exhibits would be reviewed at the time of building permit, and so the building would have to comply with these standards, in addition to the other overall transparency requirements that are included in the Land Development Code. The hours of operation would be restricted to 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., and customers would not be allowed to access the building before or after those hours. So again, this is a little bit less than what the applicant was originally proposing, but we believe this complies with some of the concerns that were raised by the surrounding neighborhoods. Landscaping and buffering would be required as shown in the plans, but also that we would require some additional buffering to the north of the building towards Beacon Terrace, again, to help preserve their nature trail and to minimize the impacts as much as possible on their property. It should be noted that there are no building entrances or anything else on the north side of the building, so it's already, we believe, a benign use related to Beacon Terrace, but the buffering would help kind of further reinforce that. Signage would be in compliance with our Land Development Code regulations, but EMC, the electronic message boards would be prohibited. And then outdoor sales, display, and storage would also be prohibited as part of this project. This is a little different in that the first hearing will be held on Monday because the applicant counsel is unavailable on the 20th. The final decision would be scheduled for April 3rd. So for the public to know, first hearing's on Monday, final decision would be scheduled for April 3rd. First reading. First reading on Monday. The final decision and the public hearing and the final decision on April 3rd. I know Mr. Campbell is also here representing the development as well, and he can answer any specific questions you may have of the project.
Do you have any questions?
I do, but just briefly, Chuck, when they go through and they get their all approvals except for the access to Hardin Boulevard, how long does that run before they have to? I guess that's predicated on their acquisition of the property or something like that, but it's, if they already own the property, how long does that stipulation run?
I mean, this would become binding going forward, so it wouldn't be really specific to a specific applicant. But if the applicant closes on the property, moves forward, I mean, you could probably see construction out there in 6 months or less.
I mean, I'm assuming that they're having issues getting DOT to give them access to Hardin Boulevard.
We had a pre-application meeting last year with the previous proposal with DOT, and I think DOT was amenable. I mean, I don't think they had really any significant issues. The big question is, whether or not a right turn lane would be needed on Hardin Boulevard, because there's a utility pole that's close that would have to be relocated, and that was always a problem with projects that generated more traffic, is that you have to put a right turn lane in. That's a huge cost. Again, too, the median modification on Hardin Boulevard itself is not insignificant in terms of cost, and that has scared, I think, a number of folks away as well. Obviously the self-storage, this applicant understands that that's a requirement, but we're not aware of any red flags that DOT has at this point that would cause them to not approve a driveway connection at this location for this use.
Is there a rule in general that if you go through the process and you get your land use and all the application and you're ready to get a building permit, but you don't get a building permit, and how long does that linger on?
The site plan would be valid once it's approved for 18 months.
18 months, okay.
Commissioner Music?
I'm curious about, and I think that personally that this is a good project. I mean, we have right down from us where our office is, there was another warehouse, mini storage up, and there's almost no traffic that goes in there. So, the traffic that's going on to Hardin off of that would be very good. The only thing I'm curious about is the signage. that you guys, said that there was no, what's the reason for that? Because I was just double checking. I think that if you go farther south, the eye clinic there has a sign that, so I thought maybe at first you're not wanting it because it can, cheese up the area, but you go farther down and a doctor's office has it. So help me with that.
It's really because of the proximity of this property to Grasslands and the Grasslands entrance and Edgewood Drive and everything happening there is that because of the concerns that we had heard from the neighborhood, this was a really kind of a more kind of apparent kind of mitigation measure to say if we want this to look more like an office, let's not have a sign that says, screams self-storage. So that was the logic behind that condition.
And Commissioner, the applicant is okay with that condition.
Yeah, and I think that the applicant, when we consider what we had before with the outdoor parking and the canopies and stuff like this that were bothering the people, to the west of that, I think that this is good. But okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thanks, Chuck. Palmer?
All right, I've got a resolution ratifying the lots clearing assessments from the equalization hearing. The second item is related to the certification report earlier on in the agenda. This is simply amending the map attached to the agreement to reflect some of the properties that have been annexed into the city limits.
And it's just very, two very small properties on one on Swindell, one on Pipkin Creek Road. So our city development matters have not expanded to any great degree this year.
Thank you.
The third item is a resolution authorizing the mayor or mayor pro tem to sign a memorandum of agreement with the FDOT. FDOT is going to be donating some cameras and other traffic monitoring technology to the city that we'll install on certain state road intersections within the city limits. And in return for that, we agree to maintain those facilities that they're providing. We'll be compensated for our maintenance costs. And we also are agreeing to share a lot of data between our Traffic Operations Center and the DOT's Traffic Operations Centers. Greg and Tess, right, are here with any technical questions.
Any questions? Oh, Commissioner.
The cameras, how are we using those? Is that for monitoring intersections, traffic flow?
So this project basically connects our system with the DOT so that we can, if there's a diversion off the highway, we can better manage that, get the traffic through town and on their way. And the other component of it is roadside units for connected vehicle technology so that we can start to have the infrastructure, talk to the vehicles that have that technology available.
And we put that on our vehicles?
What vehicles?
You said that.
So some manufacturers have the ability to accept transportation messages into the vehicles. The DOT is getting into connected vehicles now, so it's putting that infrastructure in place.
And allowing our system to talk to theirs. I'm just trying to understand the technical side of it, what exactly is. Yeah.
Functionally, our signal system functions as part of the DOT's network, and this is just providing, easier communication.
So just to follow up on that, for the average user, so I'm in my car and I'm driving off of I-4 and there's an accident or whatever, that if I have that technology, it will divert me either through my GPS or it'll come up as an alert from FDOT to pop off and go around it, or?
I don't know if that there's a lot of details that are fleshed out yet, but basically, so if there's an incident on I-4, we can communicate with the DOT to get, change the signal timings to get people routed along alternate routes. I know there's a map of those alternate routes I could get to you.
No, that's just helpful for the public that's listening.
Yes.
So, we're just trying to get more for us non-traffic engineering people to understand. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Music.
When, again, going back to not being a traffic engineer or city planner or those kind of things, when I hear the generalization of this, it reminds me of when I buy a new device and it says, do I accept everything? So I slide through 16 pages and click yes, right? The next thing I know, they've come by and they've fined me for something. So I'm curious, is there something that we need to keep our eye on now? I mean, we're tying more into a bigger system and a bigger system. Is there something that we could lose locally because we are connecting to a bigger picture that now all of a sudden they're going to say, no, you guys, we're in charge of this?
So the system that we operate, we have 177 signals that we manage in our traffic operations center. 109 of those are owned by the DOT. They pay us to maintain that, and they pay us to operate the traffic operations center. So basically, they've allowed us to put our traffic signals on the system, but they're really paying us to operate the system, for their signals. So I think it's mutually beneficial. We just, we'll be in communication with them to make sure that, the changes that are being made are going to be beneficial to the traveling public.
Good, okay.
Other questions? Thank you. Appreciate it. All right.
All right, the next item, I think most of y'all have been through a conduit financing bond deal where we'll have Florida Southern or Southeastern University or the hospital approach the city and ask the city to serve as the issuer of bond deals, and it allows them to take advantage of tax-exempt IRS regulations and issue these bonds in a more economical manner. That's all gone very smoothly. However, we feel like we need to start formalizing that process more and actually charging a fee, because we do vet these things. Even though the city has no liability for our conduit financing deals, we still spend a fair amount of time looking at these, and then we'll consult with outside bond counsel. So what we've got here is a resolution to adopt an application form. So we're going to require that people that are applying to the city for this type of financing provide us background information, some financial statements. There is a application fee of $3,000, and in addition to the application fee, we would charge a fee of 0.1% of whatever the amount of their bond issue is, but that would be bookended by either a minimum fee of $5,000 or a maximum fee of $50,000 of their bond issue, which is a drop in the bucket. You've seen how large these things are. We're trying to primarily recover our costs, and we're also trying to kind of get more in line with what the industry practice is. Most jurisdictions do charge for this type of thing, and so I think, Mike, we're right there with what other jurisdictions are charging for the most part. Is that
that's correct? Right now, anybody can go to the county and do this process. We don't necessarily want to be in the business of being folks' conduit, because some schools or nonprofits may come through and ask us to provide this, and they may not be rated. Well, that we are not financially liable. We've always told you that. However, if for some reason they were to default, there is some reputational risk, and we've talked about that in the past. What happens is, if we end up getting involved in an IRS or an SEC investigation of some sort, that can take up a good bit of our time. And so what we're trying to do is get more in line with what our peers do. And so I researched what the county's doing, and then a number throughout the state. We didn't want to be the highest because we don't want this to be a tax, but at the same time, we want it to be somewhat reasonable in that we can at least, receive some benefit to the general, just all get deposited in the general fund. I like the idea of having a cap on it as well at $50,000. Some do not. We ask for the $3,000 application fee. If in fact the deal goes through, we take that $3,000 off what their total bill is to us, right? Some don't do that either. They also charge, some places charge to close on that. We're not asking for that either. So we don't want it to be a tax. And so the other thing I wanted to do is get a feel from a couple of our entities that we've interacted with in the past to get their feel. One litmus test for me is Terry Dennis, Florida Southern's CFO, my counterpart, who I have tremendous respect for, and we are their conduit for most of their deals. And he said absolutely, he completely agrees. In fact, he is surprised that we haven't before then, but there wasn't a feeling that was as important. But the more I'm starting to see, we're in discussions right now with the SEC because of something else that nothing we did, but somebody's getting investigated. And so we're providing information. It can take a good bit of time of ours, even providing extra information. So for that reason, we think this is a very reasonable request. Florida Southern was fine with it. Bond counsel for Southeastern agreed that Southeastern had no problem with this as well, which is their other larger conduit participant that we've had. Okay.
I think it's a great idea. Whenever we look at, capital outlay, time, the time of our staff, the time especially in the legal department when you're spending hours, vetting and looking at different things, I think that it's a service that we've provided for free for a long time. So I think this is a good timing issue, and to clean it up and just for other organizations to have skin in the game with us where, they're not arbitrary in requesting this support from us. And I think as a city and to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, this is really important. I'm glad you guys brought this up. Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Simmons?
What would be an example of such an exercise? I mean, you mentioned Florida Southern and Southeastern. I mean, basically, what are we doing?
So if, for example, Southeastern wants to expand or refinance and expand part of their campus, they may come in and say, hey, we want you to be conduit on it's round number, $100 million deal. They provide the $3,000. The max that they would pay is the, 1/10 of 1% on that amount, up to $50,000. So they pay $50,000 for that service. I can tell you that I know of other agencies in our community, nonprofits in our community that have had deals that were much larger than that did not have a cap. And so, I think...
Without going into too much detail, exactly what is the service that we would provide?
We are simply the conduit for it. They are using our rating because they are not rated.
We're technically the issuer of the bonds.
Right.
Yeah.
But issuing the bonds.
Yes.
Yeah. But
without
we
any
have
liability.
we have no responsibility to pay that back. And that is all laid out in the bond ordinance that they are providing.
Okay.
Right. We are the issuers. It's our name on it.
And the benefit is our bond rating to them?
Yes, because they are not rated.
Okay, thank you.
That's a lot of capital improvement projects, a lot of things that just cost the entities a lot of money. If they can get it at a lower rate,
Right. And obviously, we've been doing this for a while. Huh?
Yes. We've still, I think right now, the only is that I can think of LRH. We've done conduit for Southeastern, Florida Southern, and we still have a small one with Carpenter's Home from many, many years ago. But that's it. It's not many, but they can be large in size, and if folks start transitioning around to where we see more monies coming from the federal government and folks avail themselves to some of those and want to borrow for those ahead of time, we could see more of that. That's why I wanted to be slightly higher than what the county's doing. So they are the most appealing option, but we can still help anybody that needs it.
Commissioner Reed, I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, just one follow-up question. What is the criteria for our providing that service? Is to them, do they have to meet some threshold, some standard, or they just come to us and...
That's what this
That's
is.
this application now.
We're trying to tighten that up some. For us, it's been just a case-by-case assessment of bond issue and whether we think it's a good idea or not.
Based on gut before.
Yes.
Well, now we have like a framework.
Yeah, not quite so much
I'm
gut,
kidding.
but yeah, I know you're playing. But they obviously, whether it's Florida Southern or Southeastern or the hospital, they always have come to us with their bond counsel's opinion ahead of time.
Okay.
And every one of those is someone that we are very familiar with, and so that's made it even easier to then research and say, okay, yeah, we vet this, we think this is good, they've done all their due diligence. If we even have a question, then we bring our bond counsel in as well.
Okay.
But between Stearns and I, we've seen so many of these deals over the years that we're pretty comfortable with sniffing through and just to make sure that it's all clear. But yeah, it's usually their bond counsel bringing an opinion to us as well as the deal.
One thing that's another component of this actually is that it specifies that if the bonds will not qualify as investment grade, that we will only allow you to sell those bonds to institutional investors, large institutional investors. So if it's a non-investment grade bond, we're not going to allow you to just issue those to the public.
Yep.
Which that does have a benefit to us, and then we're not going to get involved in some big mess.
Right. Exactly right.
You're going to be dealing with sophisticated purchasers of these bonds.
Insurance companies and the large purchasers of bonds are buying them. They're doing their due diligence as well, and so it's less likely we're going to have a challenge in the future.
And these are anchor institutions, so they're, pretty substantial within our community. Commissioner Reed?
Thank you. There again, I like the 1% personally. There again, I've been involved in two projects, not myself as an owner, but fortunately as a broker. Bridgewater defaulted on their bond. The golf course out by Mulberry off the other side of Christina defaulted on their bond too. So the bondholders took over those developments. And so there is a lot of, when you get to the big ones, they have a tendency to go. Almost everyone I've ever seen, the third guy owner is the guy who makes the money. The bondholders lose, the owners lose, and the guy who gets it at the discount price is the guy who makes the money.
Right, and so fortunately, we're able to say thank you anyway if somebody comes, but these are, LRH and SEU and Florida Southern are well-established organizations, and so they're not necessarily going to be spec building a golf course or something, which is a benefit to us.
In general, though, if you get into an issue, a $150,000 law bill is not,
Yes.
is
Absolutely.
not that quick. So I encourage the 1% versus $50,000.
Well, it is 1%, but it's up to $50,000.
Well, that's
0.1%.
0.1% is up, but it's up to $50,000.
So it would never be more than $50,000.
It would never be more than $50,000.
If somebody borrows $15 million, then they're going to be for $150,000.
Right.
But they're not going to be doing that type of stuff. I presume you never can tell, though.
Right. Right now, I'm comfortable with capping it at $50,000. We've yet to see a case where we've had to put any kind of time into it. If for some reason we saw that in the future, then I'm not going to be shy about vetting it through Palmer and Sean and bringing it back and saying, hey, we want to change this. But I think for right now, much more than that, it could come across as a tax, and I'm just not in favor of poking somebody in the eye if I don't have to.
Well, hopefully they wouldn't default, but then once you pay your $150,000 law bill, then you can't get it back. Then you set the precedent for next time. But
agreed.
If you have a higher standard, you hopefully don't even have to go to it. But invariably, I think it's more prudent to be a safeguard.
This is a good starting point, I think. Commissioner Music?
How many times have we been the conduit? A lot?
8-10 times in my 27 years.
Okay, so we've done it a decent amount, and we've not had any issues. So this is only making it better.
I would agree. I think that the application itself vets a lot, and then the monetary piece is just.
It's just enough to weed out potentially some potential issues.
Right.
Also to enact the seriousness of it and give us a little bit of money.
But again, remember, if a nonprofit comes and they present this, they either approach Palmer or they approach me, and we don't feel comfortable with it, we can say thanks anyway, and we will.
Yeah.
Right? If we think we have these great established organizations, this is just another safety net.
And this is just us tightening up the ship just a little bit.
Absolutely.
Mike, haven't we had 2, though, in the past year?
Yes.
Yeah.
The hospital.
Hospital one in Florida Center.
But the hospital wasn't conduit,
That's true.
you're talking about the lease, they used someone else. I think the lease, they used somebody else. They were before that.
Yeah.
They were, Sean, to your point. But 8 or 10, I mean, you may go 2 or 3 years and not have anything, right?
Well, that's what the point I'm making.
Yeah.
That may be the case, but then you may have a year where you do 2 or 3.
Yes, that's exactly right.
We've
No.
experienced that
Yes.
here recently. so.
Yes. Not uncommon. With the higher rates, maybe not as much, unless, for example, they're going to take advantage of an influx of Fed monies or something like that.
Okay, thank you. Palmer, we're at C2.
Yeah, this is a task authorization with Kaminga and Rubitz. This is for replacement of a sewer line starts at Griffin Road, the intersection of Griffin Road and Providence Road. We're replacing about 1,600 feet of sewer line that has deteriorated because of the corrosive sewer gases. That existing pipe is made, or line is iron pipe, and that will be replaced with PVC pipe. We went out and had a number of contractors pre-qualified pursuant to a request for qualification. We have existing contracts with those specific pre-qualified contractors, and then for this replacement project, the city's purchasing department issued a bid, and of those pre-qualified contractors, we actually had 2 bids that were submitted. Kaminga and Rubitz was determined to be the lowest responsible bidder that came in at a cost of $2,822,910. So they will be completing all of the utilities construction work, dealing with the sewer line replacement, relocation of the existing force mains, and all the associated work that goes along with that. This project is included in Water's FY 2023 budget, and Robbie's here, and he can answer any technical questions you may have specific to the project itself.
Oh, you're over there. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Robbie, anything you can add just to, I mean, how common is this? Is this cause for concern beyond this area? I mean, do we see this often?
So, for whatever reason, we decided to put in ductile iron back in the 80s, and it was not lined. We still put some ductile iron pipe in the system today, but we put there's a called 401 Protecto lining that we put on the inside of it. This one, for some reason, did not have that. Also, as it goes down the road, it's a drop of about 50 feet from Providence Road down to 98. And the way it was designed at the time, it's kind of like stairs. It goes down, and they did that to keep the line shallower, make it easier to repair. But then the sewer drops off into the manhole, that releases gases. And so we've kind of learned from that. We won't ever do that again. This design has a more uniform flow path. It makes the line deeper, harder to repair. And we'll try not to put in ductile iron as much. And in this case, we won't. We'll put in PVC. This is a big project. This is a 24-inch line. The only place to construct it is in Griffin Road. We will close at least one lane down, and so that you guys don't have the plans, but I showed the area where the work is going to take place. We'll close at least one lane down, potentially close down 2 lanes. We'll see how the MOT shakes out and what the county desires. This is a county road, so you guys might hear some complaints about it at some point, but they technically should go to the county and or to the utility. We'll do a lot of coordination with the Audi dealership. We're going to have, at times, their driveway closed. We've already met with them preemptively to try and sort out those issues, understand what they might have. The biggest one being trucks coming in, delivering new cars. So we'll sort that out, make sure all that happens ahead of time and scheduled at the appropriate time. We're doing 1,600 feet, and I'm just giving you a little heads up. Probably the next meeting, I'll bring you another one back. So we've known this line's been bad for a long time. It's so bad that we can't go in there and line it. Sometimes when it's clay pipe, or even in this case, we might be able to put a liner down it, steam or whatever it is, it hardens and makes it a little bit smaller, which uses up a little bit of capacity, but we get the life back and get the strength back. This is so thin, we can't risk running the devices down it to kind of clean the path and put that liner in it. So we're just going to replace this one. We did a small segment immediately downstream of this, I don't know, 5 or so years ago, and we're successful with that. There's another segment closer to 98 that we recently had a failure on, and we're more or less calling that emergency work. We're getting proposals now. We're still going to bring it to you guys, so not a complete emergency, but we've got to get after that one really quick. So when it's all said and done, this entire segment will be shored up and, back to full life and full strength.
Commissioner Simmons?
What is the time duration for completing the project?
This one is 270 days from when we issue the notice to proceed. We expect to issue that within a week or two after all the commission approvals and signatures and all that stuff. So I'd say January, December, January at the end of the year. If we encounter anything, sometimes we give change orders that might extend their duration if they need it, but we're expecting to complete this in 270 days, so about Christmas time.
Thank you, Rosie. Any other questions? Okay, Ramona?
The next item we have is an agreement with Xylem Water Solutions. This is for the purchase of two 70-horsepower submersible pumps that are used at the Glendale plant. The lift station at the Glendale plant is what pumps that incoming wastewater that is then treated. These pump stations handle the entire permitted capacity, which is 13.7 million gallons per day, in addition to peak flow, which would occur during storms. The pump station now currently has 6 existing pumps to do this work, as well as one pump that is a backup pump. When recently one of the pumps failed, and while we were in the process of looking at procuring or evaluating for repair, the replacement parts weren't available. And as we were going through the evaluation process, another pump failed, which obviously created a critical need to replace those pumps. Xylem has been determined as the sole vendor for these types of products with regard to the pumps, and the only authorized service repair and warranty provider for them. And in addition to the cost for the pumps, we determined that the normal lead time was a little bit too long. That put us 16 to 18 weeks, which took us to hurricane season. So in order to expedite the delivery of those pumps, we are adding an additional cost of $15,600. That would get us the pumps 8 to 10 weeks, which is a little bit sooner, so we could have those in place. So the total cost of the pumps, in addition to the expedited delivery, is $160,213.14. That is budgeted in wastewater's FY23 budget, and the existing pumps are probably approximately just over 10 years old, and they typically have a life expectancy of about 15 years. So there's a critical need to replace those.
Questions? Okay.
All right, I'll handle the next one. The next one is a new agreement with Republic for handling our recycling materials for our solid waste program. We're at the end of our existing contract with Republic, so we went out for an RFP back in September, and Republic was the sole respondent to that RFP, so we've been negotiating with them. I think Gene will tell you that the recycling market has become significantly less favorable than it used to be for us. So under this agreement, Republic will do the same thing that they've been doing. They will accept our recycling materials, they'll sort them, clean them, then ultimately market those materials on the secondary recycling market. So that'll generate revenue. We have to pay them for the services they provide. So under this agreement, we will pay them $155 per ton as a processing fee for the first 6 months of this agreement. After the first 6 months of the agreement, that will increase to $162.75 per ton, so that's a 5% increase. And this is actually only a one-year agreement because of the uncertainty in this market. It does provide for 2 one-year renewals after that upon the mutual consent of the parties. If we do exercise those one-year renewals, the processing fee will go up by 5% each year. So we pay them a set amount per ton. And so that's a fixed cost that we have. And then whatever the secondary recycling market generates, that is then offset against the processing fee that we pay them, essentially. I'm simplifying it a little bit. But whatever our processing fee we pay them will be reduced by whatever we can get from the secondary recycling market. Right now, based on current costs, we're estimating that the cost that we will be paying Republic for the first year of this agreement is $622,000. That is mitigated somewhat in that if we just sent all that stuff to the landfill, we would be paying Polk County $265,979 in landfill costs. So really, the net cost of the recycling program is approximately $356,000. So this is all in solid waste FY23 budget. Gene and Peter here if you have more questions.
Commissioner Music?
Are we required to recycle some of this stuff? Is that why we're doing it?
No, there's nothing requiring us to run a recycling program.
Commissioner McLeod?
Thank you. Gene, can you talk about the recycling market right now? Just the state of it, some of the, what is going on that drives this? And a second question on the sole vendor. Is Republic the main vendor throughout Florida that other cities, counties are using? Or
Republic is the main vendor in Polk County. They're the nearest operation where we can take our trucks and direct deliver. In other words, we pick it up with the recycling truck and drive them to the material recovery facility, drop it off, and we're done. So just to give you a kind of, for instance, of the market, looking back at the history of the value of our recycling, there's a couple of things that control the value of our recycling. One is the composition of our recycling, which is fantastic. Our residents do the right thing. Our contamination only sits at about 18%, which is actually pretty good. So 72% of our stuff is recyclable. Currently, January's index prices for the makeup of one of our tons is $84.12.
Say that one more time. I'm sorry. Say that one more time.
$84.12. So if you take all the aluminum cans and cardboard boxes and you sort it all out, that 1 ton of that material is worth $84.12. So you subtract that from the processing fee. Now, historically, if you look back to September of 2021, all the way through to June of 2022, the value of the material in September was $201 a ton. So, and then in June of FY22, the value of the material was $161 a ton. So the market has wide swings based on surpluses and all those different things. I'm not an index person, so, but today it sits at $84, and October 1st, it sat at $74 a ton. So it's rising again, and that value of that ton subtracts from the processing fee. We're not paying $155 a ton. We're paying $75 to $80 right now.
Commissioner McLeod, you mentioned Republic being the sole source. You're going to see our transfer station come before you the next month or so, and that gives us more control of our own destiny. We can haul our material to different MRF stations around locally around Polk County. So
MRF being an acronym.
For material recovery facility.
Sorry.
And just as a legal matter, I mean, you're using the word sole source in a more informal manner. I mean, they were the only respondents to the RFP, so we're not treating them as a sole source.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, I was just curious, Republic, if there are fewer vendors in this space, what's driving that, and thinking long-term, what does that potentially mean for our recycling program? So I'll stay tuned on the transfer.
Other questions?
Yeah, I was just going to mention the separation there, because I mean, I would imagine that Republic is taking all of this and holding it like you would a commodity until the value goes up, right? I mean, they're not just humping through it. And if it's $70, it's $70 and we get less. I mean, are they doing a diligent job of I mean, obviously they can't hold waste forever, but I mean, they have people on their side that are, like I said, index and commodity experts that are looking and saying, okay, well, let's wait another 45 days. We think we're going to be in a good spot and then unload it, which in turn helps us offset some of that cost.
Well, that's more on their side of their operation. Ours is tied to the index for the month.
It is, okay, so that's how we're paid.
So if we delivered it in January, it's tied to the January index.
Thank you, that makes sense. Good.
I have a kind of a simple question.
Sure.
When I'm recycling, let's say Gatorade bottles, do you want the lids off?
No.
Okay.
Just leave them on there.
Okay, so it all goes into one place?
Yeah, we can recycle the cap too.
I wasn't sure if somebody had to
take it off.
Back in early recycling, they wanted to cap off so when we could crush it and make it
Right.
smaller and not haul airspace, but our trucks will squeeze it hard enough to pop the cap off.
Oh, okay, good to know. All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And then is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Anything from city manager?
No, thank you.
All right, so that moves into, we don't have anything for utility. We have no audience right now. And mayor and commissioners. Anyone? Yes, Commissioner Reed?
Sean, tomorrow morning, Saturday, tomorrow morning. Is it 9 o'clock or 7 o'clock? I've got two different things on my calendar. And do we need some kind of special pass, or they know who we are, or we want to go out there and get close to the demolition?
I am showing that at 9 o'clock. And if you'll RSVP, but we can have Tracy even do that for you, to Marisol over at Lakeland Electric. They'll work out all the details for you.
9 a.m.
We'll go by there and they'll direct us somewhere.
Tracy will get with you before the end of the day.
All right.
And tell you for sure.
Anyone else? Commissioner Mann? No? All right, look at that, 10 a.m.
As a matter of fact, Commissioner, it's remarks and refreshments are at 9. The implosion is actually at 11.
Thank y'all.
So you